Chapter 30. Ida the Mechanic. "Crash positions!" shouted Ida. William had already wrapped his arms round his head. The van skidded and slid faster and faster across the field, heading straight for the tree. Ida squeezed between the front seats, pushed William out of the way, and sat herself in the driver's seat. The outer branches dragged across the roof. Ida pulled with all her weight on the steering wheel. The van bounced over a root, scraped the side of the trunk, and finally stopped with a bump where the snow had drifted into a heap. In the back, laundry toppled onto Brian, Fingers, Jin, Robert and Frank. Frank's woof sounded more excited than anything, and when he emerged from the heap of white sheets, he leaped over Ida's shoulder and, standing on his back legs on her lap, licked her face. William was squished up against the driver's door. It opened and he tumbled out into the snow. Baby squeezed Ida's shoulder. "You did it! That was some trip!" Ida felt so excited she could have sworn a swarm of bees had mistaken her stomach for their hive. She had driven, sort of. Steam hissed from under the bonnet. The engine popped and then made a curious snapping sound. "Oh, I don't like the sound of that." Ida jumped out, stepped over William and opened the bonnet. "I'll take the dog for a walk," said Fingers. "Not without me," said Robert. "I don't like the look of him." Baby nudged William with her foot. He groaned and curled up in the snow. "It's the fan belt," said Ida. "I know what to do." She pointed at William. "Best get him out the way where he can't do any more damage." "Rightio," said Baby. "Looks like it's up to you then, Ida Barnes." Being needed as a mechanic was like two great big open arms welcoming her, like she'd suddenly become herself. She'd been through so many different feelings with these girls: distrust, dislike, despising even. But they were right. She had needed them, and now they needed her. It was the best feeling. Snow was soaking into the bottoms of Ida's overalls, and the engine was still hissing, but it was too dark to see exactly what was going on. Jin handed Ida a torch. "Does this help?" "Oh, thank you. Can I borrow a stocking too, please?" Conveniently, Jin pulled one from her dressing gown pocket. "Ah, you want to fix the fan belt, don't you? No idea how you do it, though." Baby held the torch as snowflakes tickled the back of Ida's neck. She removed the broken belt with another snap and a ping, then bound the stocking round the fan pulley wheels. When she checked it was tight enough, she closed the bonnet. While Ida was wondering how on earth they were going to get back on the road, Fingers, Robert and Frank were trudging towards her and Baby through the snow. "There's another road up there, and a sign for Southampton." Fingers pointed to a small snowdrift where only the top of a hedge was visible. "William!" Baby joggled him awake. "What's the matter?" said William. "You're digging," said Baby. But as far as digging was concerned, Frank was the dog for the job. With his tail going 19 to the dozen, he made short work of the snow. Then, with some enormous heaves from them all, the van rolled through a scrawny hedge onto the road. Only William collapsed with the effort of it. "What are we going to do about him?" Baby pointed to William face down in the snow. "I can drive," said Ida. Hadn't she just steered them away from disaster? And unlike William, she knew the difference between the brake and the clutch. "Well, what are we waiting here for then? Get her in and start her up." Ida stared at the driver's seat. This was it, her chance. The van rocked as everyone else jumped in, and Baby did a roll call. "Fingers?" "Too right, I'm here." "Brian?" "I'm here too." "Jin?" "Certainly, darling." "Glow boy." "Oi, it's Robert, and I keeps telling you." "That's everyone, ain't it?" "Woof!" "Woof, Frank." "Sorry, boy." "Oi, you can't leave me behind." "Hop in, then." A snowy William clambered in the back. "Put your foot down, Ida." The crank was on the floor of the cab. Ida wondered if she'd need it. She turned the key in the starter motor first. It turned over, but the engine didn't catch and started with the gurgling mix of petrol and air. So she jumped out and fitted the crank in its socket under the radiator and between the headlamps. "Please let Jin's stocking work," she prayed under her breath, and gave the crank 3 strong turns. When the engine gurgled into life and settled into a pleasing hum, in spite of the cold, Ida glowed all over. Her repair had worked. She slid the crank across the floor of the cab and hauled herself into the driver's seat. Her legs were a bit shorter than William's, so she had to sit on the edge. Ida gripped the wheel and felt all the speed locked under her bottom. She could be sat astride a moon rocket like Flash Gordon. With her left foot on the clutch, she wiggled the gear stick to find first gear and then cautiously put her right foot on the accelerator to find what Mr. Rogers was always calling the bite. Ida released the handbrake. The van lurched and bounced and bumped and stopped. She knew this could happen, so she tried again. Jump out, crank, jump in, but this time she pulled the throttle out a little further to let a little more fuel into the carburetor, but not too much to flood the engine. After a few lurchy bounces, the van was moving. Looking east, back towards Netterfield, an orange dawn streaked the sky. It couldn't be 8 o'clock yet, could it? The road stretched ahead, and the sign for Southampton did indeed say 6 miles. Getting there couldn't take much more than half an hour. A distant trilling rang in her ear. Ida was sure she could do better than William at outrunning the police. "Hold on, everyone!" She put her foot down and determined to get to Southampton first. Ida sped across an old iron bridge. They were almost in the town. Cars and vans and lorries, more than she'd ever seen before, filled the roads. Ida slowed down. Speeding would only get her noticed as an underage driver. They passed a tall clock tower on a building 10 times the size of Netterfield Town Hall. The clock showed just gone 25 past 8, and the sky glowed an angry red over the docks ahead. There was no sign of the police van. Robert pushed himself between the front cab seats. "Wow, I ain't ever been anywhere as big as this before." The big town was awake, so much busier than Netterfield. Wrapped and muffled with morning papers tucked under their arms, people bustled here and there to work. Ida turned down a hill by the railway line. This was it, stage 1. Get the children off that boat. At the dock gate, a man in uniform came out from his hut and held up his white-gloved hand. Ida's head was a blank, but Jin leaned across. "Urgent delivery for the Monte Olivia?" "Well, I'm afraid you're too late, miss. She's just weighing anchor." "What? It's not 9 o'clock yet?" Ida was sure she hadn't made a mistake. "No, 8:30 on the dot. She's sailing bang on time." With his hands clasped behind his back, the gate man did a little bounce on his heels to underline the fact that they had missed the boat. Nothing more to say. He brushed the collected snow from his shoulders and returned to his gatehouse. "Go, Ida, go!" shouted Brian from the back. Ida slammed her foot hard on the floor. Jin and Baby gripped the dashboard and Robert tumbled into Frank in the back of the van. Ida haired past great long sheds, brick and corrugated iron, a line of cranes like giraffes leaning over the quayside, and she skidded over a crisscross of railway tracks. Steam seeped out from under the bonnet. A horrible blackboard scraping, squealing noise came from the engine, and then a coughing and a spluttering, and finally a foot. Steam billowed out, clouding the windscreen. Ida put her foot down and tried to see through the billows, but the engine had died. The van wasn't going anywhere. Not anymore. Ida jumped out of the driver's door and ran across the quay. From way down in her throat, she cried, "Stop! Stop!" But it was like throwing a pea at a charging rhinoceros. The Monte Olivia, with her 2 funnels, was the biggest ship in the dock. Nobody on board could hear. The Monte Olivia was the biggest ship leaving the dock. The last piece of gangplank disappeared on board. Her horn was sounding her departure, and the ropes that tied her to the quayside dangled free and slapped the side of the ship as it manoeuvred away. And after all that, they really were too late. They'd lost all those poor children, and because the van had died completely, Ida had lost Bonnie too.